Coming to you from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. This is The Gailey Show, also streaming right now on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@The Gailey Show. I'm your host, John Parker. Joining me in the studio is our executive producer, Jim Pounds.
Hey, all.
In the control room is Brett Johnson. Hey, Brett.
Hey there.
All right. Well, it is Friday, which means culture and entertainment. What is on the show today? So the Oscars are on Sunday, and since they are one of the gayest events of the year, Jim and I, we're going to continue our brutally honest Oscar reviews. Today we have Anora, A Complete Unknown, and Sing Sing. But up first, Threshold Theater is going to mount their first full-length production this April. Founded in 2019, Threshold Theater's mission is to produce fresh LGBTQ plus works, which means creating a place for the voices of the LGBTQ community. They will debut the world premiere of Spellbound, a new play about the wrong way to use a love potion by award-winning queer Minneapolis playwright Matthew A. Everett. Performances will run Friday, April 18th, 2025, through Saturday, May 3rd at the Phoenix Theater in Uptown Minneapolis. Founder and managing director of Threshold Theater, David Schlosser, joins us, as well as the literary director and playwright, Matthew A. Everett. Hello, David and Matthew. Welcome to The Gailey Show.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Actually, David, you're a returning guest. It's so good to see you again.
Yeah, well, nice to be brought back. That's always nice. I didn't screw up the last time, so that's fabulous, I guess.
Yes. We didn't put you on the ban list. All right. Well, Spellbound. Maybe, Matthew, let's start with you about what the play is about. The wrong way to use a love potion? Question mark?
Yes. Well, thanks to his mischievous friend Jeffrey, who's actually being played by David. The character of Micah accidentally doses his best friend Augie with a love potion, which would be fine if Augie wasn't straight and married, and if his wife Sarah wasn't pregnant and a practicing witch.
Oh, no.
So basically the race is on for folks to whip up the antidote with the help of the local proprietor of the metaphysical supply store before anybody does something they may regret. So they're going to whip up the antidote, hopefully in time. That's the short version.
Can we call this a farce, or is it that?
It can get a little farcical. There's sort of romantic comedy elements. There's drama. There's all sorts of stuff going on. I was saying to somebody in an interview the other day with the director that it's kind of a comedy right up until the point that it isn't, and so things take a turn and kind of go back and forth. But it's and there's original music in the show. Augie is a singer-songwriter. And he decides that because he's in love with his friend Micah, he's going to write him a song that his friend Micah can play on the guitar since he's learning to play guitar. And so they sort of bond over this, and they think that that's going to keep them out of trouble. But, things go off the rails, as they so often do.
Well, first, I want to congratulate David and Threshold for getting this full production. I know when we had you on before, we sort of said, well, that's the goal. That's what we're aiming towards. That's what we're hoping happens. So congratulations for doing that, and or being about to do that. So is this, can anybody take anything away from this particular production? Is this just because you have a incredibly talented playwright that works with you, that was sort of serendipity, or does this production mean anything beyond its own self? Do you know what I'm asking?
I do. Yeah, I think that a lot of people can take away from this show. So when we started out the company, we were looking for what was going to be our first show, and we were looking at local playwrights, and we happened to know somebody who's a local playwright. It was before Matthew even joined the company off of there, and so I've worked on Matthew's shows before. I've seen his work before. Knew that we liked it. He sent over a couple scripts. Read this one. We liked it. It was funny. It's touching. It offers a version of the LGBTQ plus community that isn't downtrodden. There isn't anything bad about it. It's this wonderful little love story about friendship, about love, about community, about being together. It's funny. It's got music. I mean, it kind of has the entire package in it. And so that's why we went with it.
Pining after straight guys, that's like everybody's
Absolutely.
subtext, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
I like how it's subverting that. I like the subversion of that. I think it was reminding me of that film, which is a different plot altogether, because that's more of a queer take on A Midsummer Night's Dream. What is the name of it? A World, Were the World Mine?
Were the World Mine, yeah.
Lovely. But that one is where everybody gets turned gay because of a wish or something. I'm totally misremembering the plot of that. But Matthew, I do want to know, what is the origin story of Spellbound?
Well, it's sort of the idea came from November Playwriting Challenge that I was doing through a theater company that I know in Chicago. One of the challenges one day was write a scene in which magic is real. And so the notion of, a love potion being accidentally applied to somebody that it wasn't supposed to be just seemed like it might be a fun thing to just sort of scribble on for a day. And then I started to go, well, that's actually an interesting idea. Let's see kind of where that goes. And when I brought sort of the full first draft to my writing group, one of the writers in the group at the time, my friend Eli, sort of said, "Oh, this is kind of taking a dump on my church, because some of the stuff about paganism and witchcraft and everything is not exactly right. But I like all of the weird sort of consent things going on here, and the sort of fluidity of the nature of sexuality and friendship and love and all the rest of it. So I think you should pursue it here. Let me give you a little 101 on the yeses and the nos and the do's and the don'ts." And then and that all made the play that much stronger. And once I got the thumbs up from them, then I was sort of like, all right, well, then we'll it was one of those ideas that seemed really potentially very thorny. And they often say that if an idea scares you, you should probably keep working on it until it teaches you what it's trying to teach you. And so we just kept plugging away at that. But yeah, this thing's been in process since back in 2016 was when I started writing it. 2019 was when it sort of crossed the paths of Threshold as it was coming together, and now here we are finally in 2025. So as with all plays, a long gestation period before it finally makes it in front of an audience.
And Matthew, you've been produced I'm going to say all over without knowing anything specific, but I know you've been produced in many other cities, many other theaters and other places. Is that right?
Yeah, I haven't just been produced in Minneapolis. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Minneapolis has been very good to me in all of my plays. But yeah, I've been fortunate enough to have friends in California and Pennsylvania. And those are the two that come to me right off the top of my head. Folks that taught in schools who commissioned work and things like that. So I've had the opportunity to develop new work or to see my plays done on a variety of different stages with all sorts of scrappy little theater companies round and about, people that just sort of took a shine to an idea or a particular character or just kind of liked my style. And so I've been fortunate that way. But it's been a while since I've had something up on a stage that was just sort of a full-length play that was just me, and it wasn't like me in a collection of shorts or something. So it's going to be nice to be back in a rehearsal room again.
That's great. And David, tell us about the director. I wasn't familiar with his name. That means nothing, but just tell us about who that is.
Denzel Beelan is a kind of Renaissance man around town. A little bit. He people may know him really from Brave New Workshop, which is where he really has his home base. Denzel was actually our artistic director for about 3 years with the theater company. He left to go literally pursue his own, I got my things, I want to do this off there. So that's when Denzel left us as the artistic director at Threshold off of there. But Denzel just, he brings this love, this enthusiasm. He knows the script, obviously. As he came on board as the artistic director, we were like, by the way, this is the show that we're going to do. And he's like, oh, that's awesome, but we need funding. And he's like, all right. So once we got all that put together, Denzel was definitely just the perfect choice for it. Again, his background in dealing with improv, dealing with the LGBTQ plus community off there fits right in with it. So everything and he just brings an excitement to it that is going to help everyone just flesh out the ideas. And I know Matthew and Denzel have been working together with their ideas on how to work together with, the playwright in the room, which.
Yeah, he can't go off half-cocked, can he? Because the playwright.
No. right. Most of the time, the playwrights are dead. So,
Denzel directed a short play of mine before, so we're used to working together. So we're excited to get to work together on a full-length piece and sort of develop something in the room with the actors. So that's going to be exciting.
Talk about the Phoenix Theater, because I feel like, in my mind, there's a lot of places that have been called the Phoenix Theater. So which
sounds appropriate?
The Phoenix Theater, literally, is this one? I mean, where is the current Phoenix Theater?
Yep. So this is going to be, it's on Hennepin and 25th. And so.
Is that an old Brave New Workshop?
Yes, it used to be the home of the Brave New Workshop, actually, oddly enough.
Okay.
So it's a lovely black box theater, really is. So it's a great canvas for what we were looking for. Another reason that drove us to Matthew's script is the style of the show is not like, we're not talking a traditional box set off of there. It's very much the actors, Matthew's words, being forefront into it, and then just being painted with a black box set. And we have a wonderful production crew coming on for all of those design elements with it. So we're super excited.
How many does it seat? Is it a couple hundred?
It's about 70.
Okay. Oh, that's really nice and small.
So so it's a very intimate, lovely small theater. There's not a bad seat in the house at all.
Right.
I love the idea of that space for how you're describing this play.
Yeah.
That just feels like to have that intimacy there is going to be really special.
Right.
We are coming up on a break here. When we come back from the break, David and Matthew, David, I remember when we ran into you in Pride a few years ago, and you told us the idea about Threshold Theater, and now here we are, X number of years later, with the full production. So I'd like to ask both of you about the journey of the organization, how you've gotten here, because we need more stories like this. We need more organizations, and the support that you all have gotten and the leadership that you have. We need that replicated. So I want to ask you about that. When we come back from the break, you are listening to The Gailey Show. We are talking about the upcoming production of Spellbound at Threshold Theater world premiere, which will debut in April. Stay tuned. More after the break. Welcome back to The Gailey Show. I'm John Parker. We're here with David Schlosser and Matthew A. Everett from Threshold Theater. Founded in 2019, Threshold Theater's mission is to develop and produce new scripts of living LGBTQ+ playwrights. They are mounting their first full production this April, the world premiere of Spellbound, Matthew's play. Congratulations, Matthew, on that, and to David. As I was saying before the break, David, I remember, I don't know why this memory is so crystal clear in my head, but I remember running into you at Pride. I think it was near the Quatrefoil tent. We did, not just me. And you were telling us about Threshold Theater, and we're like, wow, that's such a great idea. We can't wait to see where it goes. And now here we are, first full production. I mean, and Matthew, you are the literary director for the theater as well. Talk to us, both of you. I'd love to hear the journey that you've been on and how we got to this place, because it's absolutely inspiring.
Well, the journey was long. What happens when you're not rich and a bunch of artists get together. I originally started, it's been over 10 years, really, that I've been thinking about this style of company. And the biggest example of that is I wanted a place, a home, a community that we told the complexity of all of our stories. So it's not just focused on, one letter of the alphabet community that we live in off of there, but that it really is the representation of the entire community, age, race, gender, religion, gender identity, all of that, and being able to find a place to do that. That doesn't mean in every single show you're going to get that. Doesn't mean in every single season you're going to get every single aspect of it. But a place to be able to tell those stories for people to come and see them out there, to see themselves on stage out there. And sounds a little hokey, but it's when we start telling our stories that we can break down the discrimination. You have to see each other to understand each other. And so that was the impetus. And then I begged and pleaded and cajoled a lot of people going, hey, I got this idea. And they're like, are you sure? And I'm like, I'm sure. And we came together in 2019. And then, you know, actors starting a theater company, always a great idea because, you know, everyone has a lot of money to throw around and just perfect out there. So
Oodles of cash everywhere you turn.
absolutely, we're printing money left and right. So you know, we had to take it slow off of there, and that's doing, you know, fundraisers. We started off with the cabaret event, which we do every year now, on National Coming Out Day, because we came out as a theater on National Coming Out Day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yep. James, give all the credit to James Zappa on that one. As we were figuring out what to do, he's like, hey, coming out day. We're like, you know what? Kind of a genius. So we do that. And then we just started a reading series, put out for, you know, writers to send us scripts, and they wrote and they send us scripts. And so we just started doing a reading series to get their scripts out there to be heard, to get feedback for the writers out there. As we raised money, started doing shows and writing grants and being told no, and then rewriting grants, and then submitting
And
them
being told no, and
and
then
being
rewriting grants.
to be able to get here. So
I have so much respect for that, David, because as you know, I was part of Outward Spiral at the beginning, and I know what a thankless, hard road that is. And so for you to have persevered with probably very little encouragement, frankly, is a testament to you. So congratulations.
Well,
for that.
pandemic, and then the worst
Right.
election.
Yes.
and
We started the readings virtually just because that was the only thing we could do at the time, and that actually gave us sort of kind of a gentler on-ramp than we might have had if we were just trying to start right out of the gate and everyone was producing theater all around us and what have you. And when the company started, I didn't come onto the company for like a year or so, but when the company started, there were still a number of other LGBTQ plus theater companies around town, and by the time the pandemic was over, they'd all shuttered, and so suddenly it was like, well, where'd everybody go? And so thankfully now we see more queer theater companies and companies with queer sensibilities and LGBTQ artists kind of bubbling up around town, which is nice to see. So it's nice that we're not on our own anymore. But we are the only theater company that I'm aware of that's just exclusively doing new works. And we were very deliberate about during the initial series of readings. And as we've gone on, now we do them live at the Black Heart in St. Paul, in their little lounge in the back. We're being very deliberate about making sure that we have diverse casts and that we bring in a variety of different types of people to direct, and then also choosing the scripts themselves so that there's a variety of different things across the spectrum: trans stories, bisexual, asexual, gay, lesbian, and we've sort of run all the way across. So there's comedy, there's drama, there's history, there's sci-fi, there's just like a whole bunch of different things going on, and that's sort of the pipeline from which we choose the scripts that we're ultimately going to produce. The initial virtual reading we had was actually of Spellbound. We sort of used that as our guinea pig to figure out, like, how do we do this Zoom recording thing, and how are we going to edit this, and is the audio going to work, and how are the actors all going to interact with one another, and how do you direct something like this or rehearse something like this. So like everybody, we were kind of learning as we went there, but that was a very useful tool then for me, because I sort of sat down with the recording and went through a scene at a time, and Actors, as you know, Jim, as any writer will have to admit, actors rarely need all the words you give them in order to get the points across that you need. So a lot of it is just cutting. It's like, oh, you don't need half of these words. That's fantastic. That's what I'm going to learn during the first week of rehearsals. I'm like, oh, I could cut more out of this script. Okay, cool. And just leave them the words they need and just set them loose. I mean, I frequently will say, like, I'm the architect. I'm sort of drawing the plans. Everybody else builds the house. So it's going to be fun to watch them all build the house.
So we're coming up at the end of our time here. How do folks, can they buy tickets yet?
They can. Phoenix Theater. So our ticketing, so if they go to Phoenix Theater, I want to say it's .org. I apologize for not knowing the exact website. I'm a horrible, look at that. Shilling Joe, and I don't even know what I'm doing. But if they go to Phoenix Theater off of there, they can start buying tickets. They're all up for sale off of there.
Is it Phoenix Theater RE or ER?
ER.
We will find it and we'll post it in the show notes
thank you.
for this episode and on our website. Congratulations, Matthew and David, for Spellbound and all the work that you're doing at Threshold Theater. It's absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thank you for having us on. This is fabulous.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Learn more about Spellbound and Threshold Theater and ticket information at their website, thresholdtheatermpls.com. We're going to take a break here. When we come back, our brutally honest Oscar reviews of Anora, A Complete Unknown, and Sing Sing. Listen to our sponsors and advertisers in this break. And when you visit them, tell them you heard about them on The Gaily Show. Broadcasting from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. This is The Gaily Show. I am John Parker. Executive producer Jim Pounds is with me here.
Hey, all.
Hello to those on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@TheGaily Okay, so the Oscars are on Sunday. And last week, we started our brutally honest Oscar film reviews. You can check those out from last Friday. And today, we are going to look at Anora, A Complete Unknown, and Sing Sing. So let's start with Anora. Anora, you can currently watch it. You can rent it on Amazon. I don't know if it's on any other streamers, but that's how we watched it, is through Amazon. And it is supposedly predicted to win the Oscar for Best Picture on Sunday. It is directed by Sean Baker, stars Mikey Madsen, who may win the Oscar for Best Actress. I think it's going to be Demi Moore, but we will see. What is the film about? So it is about a young escort from Brooklyn who meets and impulsively marries the son of a Russian oligarch. Once the news reaches Russia, her fairy tale is threatened as his parents sent out for New York to get the marriage annulled. Okay, so Jim, your thoughts?
I'm not a woman, so
No.
I remember watching this and thinking, is this supposed to be ennobling of women? Because I could see somebody telling themselves that was the case, but I didn't feel that way. It's not for me to say that for women, and so I don't know. I felt like it wasn't ennobling for women. There was a gratuitous long scene in the strip thing that felt like a straight guy enjoying a long semi-pornographic. I couldn't figure out why we needed to spend 2 minutes watching all of that. I couldn't figure out how that helped the story at all. And there were other moments where I felt like she was in peril or she was very marginalized. And I know that was part of the story, but it seemed to go on a long time. And I never felt like this character for me was, and I've watched movies directed by women where the woman really clearly does sort of self actualized, for lack of a better term. And I never felt that happened here. So I found this very frustrating because I thought, what's wrong with my brain that I'm not getting what people who think this is going to win Best Picture are getting? Because I don't think it's anywhere close to being a Best Picture. It was kind of a failed effort, in my opinion, with some good elements here and there.
So it is nominated for Best Motion Picture, Best Achievement in Directing, Best Performance by an Actress in a Leading Role, Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role, Yura Borisov, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Achievement in Film Editing. And if this thing wins the Oscar for Best Picture, it'll be the worst choice since Crash in the early 2000s. First of all, it was predictable. It's so, I mean, come on, if I say an escort decides on a whim to get married to this 21-year-old son of a Russian oligarch. First of all, when I just say 21-year-old son of a Russian oligarch, I imagine you immediately know exactly who I'm talking about. A spoiled, rich playboy who does whatever he wants. There's a story about how he turned an entire pool into Kool-Aid. They just dumped a bunch of Kool-Aid in there one day. They, on a whim, they go to Las Vegas. It's everything you imagine a Russian oligarch son to be. It plays out exactly the way that you think it's going to play out. And the movie, to your point, Jim, I want to be, because I don't identify as a woman, and I was sitting there thinking about how feminist this film is or isn't. It fails the Bechdel-Wallace test. At no point during the movie do two women talk to each other about anything other than a man. And Honora is always at the victim of men's decisions. So her entire life is based off of what a man decides is going to happen, and then she responds to that. She never has a moment in the entire film of agency. And every time that she even exerts a little bit of agency, like literally a line, she is immediately smacked down by someone else, typically a man, and at the end of the film by the son's mother, when she comes out there. And it's just, even there's never a moment where Nora gets her due or gets her say, or of her own volition. And so that's why I felt like I felt, as I was watching it the entire time, I know exactly how this is going to end. Honora's character does not change at all. There is no character arc. There is no character arc for anybody in the movie. Obviously, I come in with a bias. I don't like Russian oligarchs, and so there was no sympathy there. As an Armenian American, the two henchmen for the oligarch were Armenians, and there's a whole comedy of errors part in the middle of the movie where the two henchmen and another Russian henchman basically quasi-kidnap Honora and force her to try to find the son who's run off, and they're trying to find him, and it's sort of a comedy of errors, and there's some funny moments in that. But when you compare this to Sean Baker's film Tangerine, which was a revelation, and the Armenian actor in both, Karen Kargulian, he is in both of them, and he was a revelation in Tangerine. And here I was just like, everything was stereotypical, everything was predictable, and I do not understand why everyone is so enamored with this movie. So I am going to give it a 1 out of 5 stars, and I'm actively rooting against it at the Oscars.
Wow. I won't sit next to you necessarily, but I'll give it 2 stars for some comedy. And it could have gone the other way and been she meets the oligarch and she converts him to a beautiful person and they're happily ever after. But that didn't happen, clearly. Mm-mm. You can't really convert a Russian oligarch. I think you just have to walk away. But
it all ends, and it's not even a fairy tale. Okay, I've said my piece, but okay. It's not they say it's a fairy tale, like Cinderella. It's not. It's about that for 20 seconds. Right. Anyway, moving on to A Complete Unknown. So A Complete Unknown is directed by James Mangold, written by James Mangold, Jay Cox, and Elijah Wald, starring Timothy Chalamet, Edward Norton, and Elle Fanning. It takes place in 1961. An unknown 19-year-old Bob Dylan arrives in New York City with his guitar and forges relationships with musical icons, beginning his meteoric rise and leading up to a big showdown at the Newport Folk Festival that is infamous for Bob Dylan historians and folks who follow his movies, rather. It has a number of 8 Oscar nominations: Best Sound, Best Motion Picture of the Year, Best Achievement in Directing, Best Performance by an Actor, and a leading role, Timothée Chalamet, support actress in a supporting role, Monica Barbaro, actor in a supporting role, Ed Norton, screenplay and costume design. Jim.
This was the movie that I liked the best of the ones we've seen. We've not seen all of the nominees, but this one for me was taught me something I didn't know. I didn't know that much about Bob Dylan or his dynamic. And I thought Ed Norton was spectacular in it. I thought Chalamet was fine. And then I saw him at the SAG Awards saying he wanted to be one of the greats. And I thought, ugh. So, but Ed Norton is great. And the film was, had sort of a trajectory, and you didn't always know what was going to happen. And it was very alive and very imbued with, passion and conflict. And it was really compelling. I thought it went by quickly, and I was thoroughly taken by it. I enjoyed the music. I know I'm an older person. I know that's music that I maybe would more likely like, but I thought for me, this or Conclave would be my choices for Best Picture.
I also really enjoyed this movie, and I love Bob Dylan. Particularly, I am more of the early Bob Dylan, so his folk albums, and also when he did switch over and started using electronic, guitars and moved into that kind of fusion of folk and rock music. Blonde on Blonde is one of my favorite albums of all time. So I was actually going into this very skeptical, like, really, Timothée Chalamet, you're going to play Bob Dylan? And it was absolutely spot on. I thought his voice work, he did what I imagine is as good as anybody could do in capturing the vocal sound of Bob Dylan. There are moments when you're like, I can hear it's not. But there are also times where I was like, is this Bob Dylan singing right now? Is this just a cover? And it was actually Timothée Chalamet. So I thought that was, and the costumes and the looks were just spot on as well. It made me very nostalgic. I didn't grow up in the 60s, but I was obsessed with the 60s in high school and in my early 20s. If I could go back in time at any time in life, in the world history, I would go back and be a young gay arriving in San Francisco in 1961. Like, I just, so much about the 60s I enjoy. And so this movie really made me feel nostalgic for that time. I felt, looking at what they were dealing with and the politics of that moment, even though it's really focused on Dylan and his career and his, genesis and ultimately moving into rock music and how that created a big schism with the folk community, and particularly with Pete Seeger, and that it was a showdown at the Newport Folk Film Festival, Newport Folk Music Festival.
Right.
I really felt heart-sick, nostalgic, and lonely at the end of the movie. I felt like something had been really lost of that time period. And I think folks do critique Monica Barbaro on her performance as Joan Baez in terms of the vocalizations of it. I think some folks are like, absolutely, and some folks are like, no, it really wasn't Joan. But afterwards we ended up seeing in a Hulu, I Am a Noise documentary about Joan, which I was so happy to see that, because I was like, I want to hear more Joan. If I had a critique about the film, it would have been to have more Joan in there and to have her have more agency as a character. It was really her just kind of always responding to Bob.
Right.
In that relationship.
Right.
And also didn't realize, I didn't know until I was, this year, that Joan Baez was bisexual, which, watching that documentary, which I highly recommend, I Am Not a Noise. So I don't know if they could have fit that in there as well. There was obviously a lot about Bob Dylan's life. There's another relationship they completely ignored altogether. So it's like, how do you pick and choose what you're going to include in there? I mean, it's a mess. Right. But the film isn't a mess. It does have a coherent narrative structure to it. Of all of them, I would say either this one or Conclave would be my favorite to win Best Picture. I'm not rooting for Timothy to win even though he is very, very good in this. But after that
Yes.
SAG Awards speech, I'm like, wow, you are arrogant. The next film we're going to talk about is the person I want to win Best Actor. I thought that work was really fantastic. But this was, on the whole, a very well made film. I love the vocalization and the acting work in it. The writing was very good, and the putting the music first and really letting you saturate in that, and really just, if you are a person who enjoys that music, enjoys folk, enjoys that period, they really allow the music the space. You can see these are people who like that music and they're interested in making music, and it's a really, this could have gone very, very wrong as a biopic movie, and it was clearly done with love
Right.
and appreciation and also some critique. I mean, Bob was I can't say that on the air.
No.
He was a jerk. he was also arrogant. He could be very insensitive to other people. He was very,
Yes.
very clearly self-absorbed. So it wasn't just this, rosy-eyed look at Bob Dylan in the early years. I mean, he is eccentric, but they didn't shy away from, showing the uglier sides
Right.
of Bob as well. So
Right.
I just, all in all, I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars.
I think I would say the
You have
same.
less than a minute.
I would say the same thing. 4 stars.
All right, we are going to take a break here, and we are going to talk about Sing Sing next. And the man that is leading, the star of Sing Sing, is the only man in the entire 21st century who has ever been nominated for Best Actor, and is also an out LGBTQ actor. I'm going to say that again. There's only been one person, one out actor in the entire 21st century who has ever been nominated for Best Actor. That is Coleman Domingo, our king. And we're going to talk about him next in his new film, Sing Sing. Welcome back to the Gaily Show. I'm your host, John Parker. Our executive producer, Jim Pounds, and I are giving our brutally honest Oscar reviews in anticipation of the Oscar ceremony on Saturday. Our final film that we're going to be talking about this year is Sing Sing. It stars Coleman Domingo. Coleman plays Divine G, who is imprisoned at Sing Sing Penitentiary for a crime he didn't commit, who finds purpose by acting in a theater group alongside other incarcerated men in this story of resilience, humanity, and the transformative power of art. Directed by Greg Cuidar, writers John H. Richardson, Brent Buell, and Clint Bentley. It is nominated for 3 Oscars. Best Achievement in Music, written for motion, so Best Song. For Like a Bird. Best Performance by an Actor in a Leading Role, Coleman Domingo, and Best Adapted Screenplay. A couple of interesting notes here I want to say about the film. One, a large part of the supporting cast are actually incarcerated actors. So these are men who are incarcerated, who are part of theater programming within their respective prisons. So that I thought was really lovely to have that. And then also on the production, everybody, so crew and Oscar nominee Coleman Domingo, all made the same daily rate in terms of income that they received on the film, which I don't know if that's the first time that's ever happened, but it is really remarkable that they did it that way, and really special. And so that is 2 things about that film that I thought were really, just off the bat, really stuck out for me.
And they did it as a sort of profit sharing. In other words, they will everyone on the full production
equity
list, they'll get some.
Yeah, they have equity in the film itself.
If it shows a profit, they'll all share equally in the. I mean, it's so egalitarian, which is the opposite of the movie business. And I think Coleman had a lot to do with that. At least I am led to believe that. So you have to admire the humanity of that, along with everything else.
So your thoughts?
I thought things, I'm a theater person, so I love a story that elevates theater to the importance that I think it deserves, because it does have or can have a transformative effect. under the right circumstances and in the right hands and so forth and so on. So I love these kinds of stories like Our Country's Good, where people who you wouldn't think of as being theater goers or theater lovers are exposed to its sort of raw humanity, and find themselves elevated, if nothing else, the empathy that it requires to look across the room at another person and interact with them, as opposed to being totally in your head. So I love that sort of structure. And I was all prepared to like this, and I did. I thought it was often handheld shot, so it was visceral often in my view. So you were often right up next to folks, not just Coleman, but other people too. You were right in their face, or it felt like you were standing in the room, and so if I recall, the camera would even swing from one person talking to another. It felt very non sort of typical, non-traditionally shot. And I love the energy that came from that. I love the humanity that emerged from people. And I don't know how much of that is manipulated and how much of that is real. I certainly believe, like so many of these programs that are meant to find somebody's humanity, that it can be done. And so I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I thought it was great.
So in a previous life, I was trained to be an actor. I went to school for it in Los Angeles. I studied in Oxford, England. Yes, classically trained Shakespearean actor. And I actually, the last time I was in England, after I got done, I was asked to be part of a group that would go in. We went into Her Majesty's Prison, Brixton, and we did Shakespeare with the folks that were incarcerated there. And it was exactly what happened for me that day. Was my experience of watching what happened in that film. I mean, it is magical but freeing. The men in there were doing things and making choices and committing to the exercises and the words and the roles in ways that acting students were too inhibited and had too much fear of doing the wrong thing. And they were just big, bold choices. And actually, when I was in my midsummer program in Oxford, we actually had an alum from that program who had been incarcerated, had been released, and was now pursuing acting and had made it into, the British American Drama Academy. And so I loved that. Coleman Domingo is one of our great actors. I think it's absolutely amazing how he can deliver a line with such, you know what I mean, wit, and he just gets you right in the heart with it. And then a nanosecond later, with his eyes, just this huge vulnerability, and sort of pull back the curtain and show everything that is happening with Divine G and everything that he's trying to navigate, and this crushing loss at times of not being able to move forward with clemency hearings, and then trying to move forward and being support for all these other guys. I think it was a really masterful performance, and he is my favorite. I would want him to win if I was a voter. I will say, brutally honest, the score was awful. I have never seen a film where the score was completely mismatched to the film itself. It felt like the score was from a completely different movie. I don't understand why. And it just had this movie of the week vibe to it unnecessarily at moments. And I was really surprised about that. And maybe there's a story about it, and the composer and and that's cool, but I have never seen a score so completely mismatched emotionally and even tonally. It was lots of lush strings, and it felt like I was listening to some meditation video, and it's not. But anyway, that is our time for today. If you're watching the Oscars like us, we'll be talking about it on Monday. Thank you for listening and watching. Have a great weekend, everyone. See you tomorrow at 2 p.m. for Pride on AM 950 with the best of the past week for the Gailey Show, but then the Twin Cities Pride amplified at 3 p.m., A Legal Trans Woman at 4 p.m., the Downright Upright Show with Philip Anthony at 5 p.m., 4 hours of the most comprehensive local and national LGBTQ programs on the radio and podcasts in Minnesota. Up next is the Matt McNeil Show, and after that, stay tuned for the Native Roots Radio. Keep it queer, America.